Welcome friends to Broken Narratives. I am your host Jay Firangi, coming to you from the Still City, Hamilton, Ontario. Before I go on to today's episode, I have some information to share regarding my YouTube channel. As I had mentioned when I shared the links of the last episode, that my YouTube channel had a strike because they said that I had violated their community guidelines on medical misinformation, and they were saying that the short clip that I had shared which was from episode 7 regarding J&J and Pfizer's past criminal history, violated their medical misinformation policy, which is strange because episode 7 was still up, but the short clip that I had shared from that episode was flagged, and I had a strike, so I could not upload any new content on my YouTube channel for, I think it was said that for 1 week, but I think it lasted at least 10 days as far as I know. And I don't know how long I will have my YouTube channel if I continue to upload more videos on this platform, because I have just started covering COVID-19 vaccines, and there will be much more information that which I will share that will go against their guidelines. So I also have a Odyssey, Rumble, and BitChute channel where I upload the same content. These three are free speech alternative video sharing platforms. So now onwards, I will try to share links to all three platforms and YouTube as well. I would suggest you subscribe to my channel on Odyssey. That's the decentralized platform where my content won't be banned. So you will be able to access and watch my videos on Odyssey without any issues. So I highly encourage people who have subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe me on Odyssey. And now let's get into today's topic. In this episode, I will discuss COVID vaccine effectiveness and a few more topics like relative versus absolute risk reduction, herd immunity, the percentage of population needed to vaccinate to reach the herd immunity, natural immunity, and few more topics. So the first clip is a compilation of corporate news channels reporting on COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness, that they will stop virus transmission. And this claim had no scientific basis, as you will learn from the coming clips, but it was repeated by many in news media, many politicians, and so-called health experts, government officials who had reported again and again that vaccines were effective against stopping the viral transmission. And let's hear that compilation by Matt Orfella.
The virus stops with every vaccinated person.
Do it so you stop spreading terrible disease.
And that vaccine, a key goal is to stop the transmission.
Expectation for vaccines is not to get infected.
A vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus does not infect them.
When the virus gets to you, you stop it.
You're not going to catch it, you're not going to get sick, you're not going to transmit it.
The vaccine is absolutely bulletproof.
Vaccines block you from getting and giving the virus.
100% effective at preventing COVID.
A vaccine prevents you from getting infected.
It is to keep you from getting it and then spreading it.
We have the ability to stop COVID in its tracks.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Biden tests positive for COVID-19.
When people are vaccinated, they can feel safe that they are not going to get infected.
Dr. Fauci tests positive for COVID-19.
Vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
CDC director tests positive for COVID-19. CDC director tests positive for COVID again. Fauci tests positive for COVID again. Joe Biden tests positive for COVID again.
Cases up 258%. The majority of these cases are among the vaccinated.
And this area is the most vaccinated part of Massachusetts.
I was vaccinated and I got COVID, and almost everyone we know with vaccinations had at least one bout of it.
So this was only one way that COVID-19 vaccines were different, compared to traditional vaccines, because they did not stop transmission, did not stop you from catching or spreading the disease. As you heard that they were claiming that it's 100% effective and it's bulletproof, but it wasn't true. And I discussed this in the last episode as well, that they had changed the definition of vaccine and vaccination, and they removed the word immunity and replaced it with protection. But they were saying that it is because none of the vaccines are 100% effective, which is true, which we knew, but COVID-19 vaccines had a lot more issues because it wasn't stopping transmission or catching the disease. Now let's see some more reporting on breakthrough cases. This is from NBC Nightly News from July 2021, and how many breakthrough cases were being reported at that time, and what was the claim regarding COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness at that time.
The new CDC internal report not only acknowledges that so-called breakthrough infections are rising, but that they may be as transmissible as unvaccinated cases.
Were you surprised that you had been vaccinated and got sick anyway?
Yes, absolutely.
Catherine Grego in Florida is still in isolation after testing positive about a week ago. She was vaccinated back in March.
You can still contract the virus and you can still get sick, but you're not going to get as sick as you would if you had it. So I feel like I'm very fortunate.
The CDC stopped providing public information on total breakthrough infections in late April when the tally hit 10,000. Instead, it only posted data when they led to hospitalization or death. So NBC News reached out to all 50 states. 38 responded. We found more than 125,000 fully vaccinated Americans have tested positive for COVID. According to a CDC internal document, there are now roughly 35,000 breakthrough infections per week. Keep in mind, that's a tiny percentage of the more than 160 million fully vaccinated Americans.
If you are vaccinated, you have 25 times less chance of getting hospitalized or dying.
Martha McAdam, a kidney transplant recipient, was vaccinated in February but came down with COVID in March. She was hospitalized for 48 days.
If I hadn't had that vaccine, I wouldn't be alive today.
So few things to notice, that that woman was surprised because, as you just heard, that we were told that vaccine would stop catching and spreading the disease. So that wasn't true, and CDC had stopped reporting on breakthrough cases when it reached 10,000. But people who get the vaccine and if they are still spreading and catching the disease, then vaccine mandates doesn't make any sense. So that was not corrected, and as you heard, that now they were claiming that vaccine stops you from getting ill, severely ill, or dying and ending up in a hospital. But towards the end, you also heard that lady who was a kidney transplant recipient, that she had to spend 48 days in the hospital. So if you have to spend 40 plus days in the hospital because you had COVID-19, then it's not a mild outcome of the disease. At least I wouldn't consider spending 48 days in a hospital a mild outcome of a disease. Now let's hear from Dr. Deborah Birx. She was on a White House committee who served as the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator under President Donald Trump from 2020 to 2021. And in this clip from Fox News, she will confess that they overplayed their hand. They knew that vaccine would not stop transmission, but they still put out those messages people to encourage people to get vaccinated.
I knew these vaccines were not going to protect against infection, and I think we overplayed the vaccines, and it made people then worry that it's not going to protect against severe disease and hospitalization. It will, but let's be very clear. 50% of the people who died from the Omicron surge were older, vaccinated.
So they lied about that thing, that vaccine stops you from spreading and catching the disease, and towards the end you heard that 50% of the people who were dying were elderly and vaccinated. So another thing that it's a flat out lie that vaccine would stop you from dying, and at least 50%. It doesn't necessarily say that vaccine is not effective, but the claim that it will stop you from dying, that was also false. And another clip from 2022. This is from a European Union hearing, and you will hear European Parliament member Robert Ross. He is a Dutch independent politician, and he had asked the president of international markets at Pfizer, Janine Small, regarding if the Pfizer tested their vaccine to stop transmission during their trials. And let's hear her response.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
So when the trials were conducted, they were conducted to see if the vaccine stops severe disease and death, and not stopping of viral transmission. So all the people you heard from the compilation clip that they were claiming it's 100% effective, you won't catch the virus, it's bulletproof, they were not making those claims based on clinical data itself, because they had never tested vaccines for stopping transmission. Now let's move on to vaccine effectiveness, and next clip is from July 2021, and it is regarding Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines effectiveness against certain variants. And you will hear some percentage thrown out, and I will discuss further that why those numbers, percentage numbers were misleading, or that does not give you full picture of vaccine effectiveness.
A new study out Wednesday found that 2 doses of Pfizer and AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccines offer strong protection against the Delta variant, almost as much as the previously dominant Alpha strain. Based on real-world data, the New England Journal of Medicine study confirms Public Health England's earlier findings about the efficacy of Pfizer and AstraZeneca's vaccines. Wednesday's study found that 2 doses of Pfizer's shot were about 88% effective at preventing symptomatic disease from the Delta variant, compared to 93.7% against the Alpha variant. Meanwhile, 2 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine were 67% effective against Delta and 74.5% effective against Alpha. Data from Israel, which has one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, had estimated Pfizer's effectiveness against symptomatic disease to be even lower, but suggests protection against severe disease remains high.
So you heard different numbers regarding asymptomatic disease and symptomatic disease, but all those percentage were not giving you accurate information regarding vaccines effectiveness. And I have a couple of articles regarding vaccines durability, how long they would last, how long they would protect you from the coronavirus. This one is from New York Post. Moderna says COVID-19 vaccine immunity to stay at least a year, and this was published in January 2021. Immunity from Moderna Inc.'s COVID-19 vaccine should last at least a year, the company said Monday at the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. One more article from the Times of Israel. Pfizer Moderna COVID vaccines produce long-lasting immune response study. Research indicates booster shot may not be needed, and that inoculation is able to provide defense against at least some of coronavirus variants. This was published in June 2021. The study, published Monday in the peer-reviewed journal Nature, found that the vaccines induce persistent production of antibodies, enabling the generation of robust humoral immunity. So even in June 2021, they were claiming that vaccine effectiveness is long-lasting for Pfizer, Moderna, and but was it true that, as you know, that people in various countries were offered vaccine or encouraged or mandated to take the vaccine boosters every 6 months. So as you can see, that was also a lie, that before they were claiming that vaccine would last at least for a year, for 10 months, but it wasn't true. And like in Israel, people were offered and mandated vaccines every 4 months. So that was the truth, and not what they were reporting even in June 2021. And now let's hear Dr. Paul Offit and Dr. Peter Attia discuss relative versus absolute risk reduction, the percentage that you heard in the last clip, why those numbers are not accurate in terms of vaccines effectiveness, what we are missing when you hear those numbers.
One other point on that, Paul, that I think is a real mistake that the press has made, and frankly, I think that the vaccine companies have made, is they have not communicated clearly the difference between relative risk reduction and absolute risk reduction. But you must talk about this in terms of absolute risk reduction. And when you look at the absolute risk reduction, it turns out that the J&J vaccine has a 1.7% absolute risk reduction versus a 1.2% absolute risk reduction for Moderna. And I believe Pfizer is actually less than 1% risk reduction. These are all great vaccines, but it turns out that J&J gets the most bang for its buck. It's worth keeping in the back of your mind when you have a 1.7% absolute risk reduction. That means your number needed to treat to prevent a bad outcome is very low. I mean, we're talking about what, 60 for an NNT?
No, you're right. It's interesting that, I mean, the way I think of it, just because it's easier for me to conceptualize it, is if I walk on the street in front of my house, I have a certain risk of being hit by a car. If I stand just stand in front of my house, in the lawn in front of my house, I have another risk of being hit by a car. The risk is much greater if I cross the street than if I just stand in front on the grass in front of my house. But I cross the street all the time, and never get hit. So still, the chances of my being hit are still extremely small, even though I cross the street. Even though the relative risk is much higher, the absolute risk is still very low of being hit by a car. And I think that's what people don't quite understand.
So the example Dr. Paul Offit used of relative and absolute risk reduction, that the numbers that you heard about vaccines effectiveness were relative risk reduction numbers, meaning that if you were to stand in front of your house on the lawn, how likely that you would die from an accident, or if you cross the road, but not like all the information like how likely are you to die from an accident when you if you cross the road all the time, like that number is very small. And here I have an article from the Lancet discussing those details as well. The COVID-19 vaccine efficacy and effectiveness, the elephant not in the room. And this was published in April 2021. Although attention has focused on vaccine efficacy and comparing the reduction of the number of symptomatic cases, fully understanding the efficacy and effectiveness of vaccine is less straightforward than it might seem. Depending on how the effect size is expressed, a quite different picture might emerge. Vaccine efficacy is generally reported as relative risk reduction, RRR. However, RRR should be seen against the background risk of being infected and becoming ill with COVID-19, which varies between population and over time. So as you know that catching the disease and ending up in a hospital or dying from the disease was not same for every age group. Most people who were ending up in a hospital or dying from the disease were 60 and over. So that is important when they mention relative risk reduction number. Although the relative risk reduction considers only participants who could benefit from the vaccine, the absolute risk reduction, which is the difference between attack rates with and without a vaccine, considers the whole population. ARR tend to be ignored because they give a much less impressive effect size than RRRs. And here they have those numbers, ARR. ARR is also used to derive an estimate of vaccine effectiveness, which is the number needed to vaccinate to prevent one more case of COVID-19 as 1 divided by ARR. NNVs bring a different perspective. 81 for Moderna NIH, 78 for AstraZeneca, 84 for J&J, and 119 for Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. So in other terms, when 81 people are vaccinated with Moderna NIH vaccine, it would prevent one COVID-19 case. And for J&J, it was 84 people. When 84 people are vaccinated with J&J vaccine, it would stop one case of COVID-19. So that was the absolute risk reduction number, which were not shared in any of the news reporting of COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness. And so which was also very important here. Here it also says there are many lessons to learn from the way studies are conducted and results are presented. With the use of only RRRs and omitting ARRs, reporting bias is introduced, which affects the interpretation of vaccine efficacy. Now let's move on to herd immunity. The next couple of clips are from the before the vaccines were given emergency use authorization, and there was a discussion about herd immunity, what is herd immunity and how we should reach herd immunity. And this clip is from October 2020 from a Canadian news outlet, the Global News. And here you will hear that herd immunity was a bad idea, and we should not pursue that, meaning we should not let the virus spread to the population and get to herd immunity in that way, rather than it's better to reach herd immunity with vaccination.
The Great Barrington Declaration proposes that we allow people who are young and healthy and very unlikely to die of COVID-19 to return to life as normal.
That declaration, posted by an American economic think tank, promotes focused protection of the vulnerable until we reach herd immunity. A new memo released by a group of international researchers counters. It's dangerous, unsupported by scientific evidence, and doesn't work.
Everywhere in the world where this approach has been used, cases have inevitably spread from populations that are conventionally considered low risk into the broader, more vulnerable portion of society, leading to thousands of deaths.
Herd immunity is when a majority of people have developed the right antibodies to fight an infectious invader, which only happens with a vaccine that helps the immune system recognize the invader or uncontrolled infection.
Allowing a dangerous virus that we don't fully understand to run free is simply unethical. It's not an option.
So they were all against herd immunity, not the concept of herd immunity, but to how to get there. They were saying that we should get there by vaccination and not letting the virus spread through the population. And here is an article from WHO, Coronavirus Disease, COVID-19, Herd Immunity, Lockdowns and COVID-19. Herd immunity, also known as population immunity, is indirect protection from an infectious disease that happens when a population is immune either through vaccination or immunity developed through previous infection. WHO supports achieving herd immunity through vaccination, not by allowing a disease to spread through any segment of the population, as this would result in unnecessary cases and deaths. The percentage of people who need to be immune in order to achieve herd immunity varies with each disease. For example, herd immunity against measles requires about 95% of population to be vaccinated. For polio, the threshold is about 80%. The proportion of the population that must be vaccinated against COVID-19 to begin inducing herd immunity is not known. So we did not know the percentage of population needed to vaccinate to reach herd immunity, but they were still pushing that concept that we should get there by vaccination and not by letting the virus spread, which is false, because vaccine wasn't stopping the transmission of the virus and catching the virus. So even if you are vaccinated, people were going to catch the disease. And second thing also, that vaccines were like the time it would take to stop the transmission was not dependent on how many shots you take as well. Like they were asking you to take vaccine boosters every 6 months. So then how does the vaccine will get you to herd immunity? And to reply to that, I have another clip from October 2020, and you will hear one of the signatories of Great Barrington Declaration, Dr. Sunita Gupta, countering the argument that you heard about herd immunity being dangerous and not based on scientific evidence.
This is Dr. Deepti Gurdasani, who's clinical epidemiologist at Queen Mary University in London. She called this 3 weeks ago.
And there is actually no evidence that herd immunity exists. In fact, there is ample evidence that immunity against COVID declines over time.
Could you just respond to one of your peers there on that point?
Well, the main thing to address is this issue of immunity declining over time. We've known for a while now that antibodies decline quite rapidly with time, but it's misleading to say that it implies that immune protection is lost with time. Herd immunity is just a level of community immunity that protects the vulnerable, that keeps risks of infection low. The seroprevalence, the level of antibodies you measure in a community, doesn't give you a very good idea of what the true exposure is. It's also known that a lot of people don't make antibodies at all upon exposure, because there are other arms of the immune system that deal with this virus, such as T-cell immunity. So the picture is more complex. I would say, as a baseline, we could assume that this virus behaves like any other coronavirus, where you do get herd immunity. It is true, I think also that the baseline assumption should be that the duration of immunity to this coronavirus will be the same as to other coronaviruses, which is not lifelong like measles, but it does not impact upon the building up and maintenance of a level of immunity that allows us to function normally.
So to get the full picture and to see other arms of immune system response to COVID-19 and their role in fighting COVID-19, I have a few more clips, and this is first one is from November 2020. You will hear Dr. Paul Offit and Dr. Peter Attia discuss antibodies versus neutralizing antibodies. As you just heard from Dr. Sunita Gupta, that some people don't even make antibodies because there are other arms of immune system that also respond to COVID-19.
And this is a little complicated, but when you're inoculated with a vaccine or when you're naturally infected with a virus, it's not just that you make antibodies, you induce immunological memory. So you have memory B cells, the kind of cells that make antibodies, or memory T cells. And so they're sort of like the base of the iceberg, with the antibodies being the tip of the iceberg. Do they matter? They do matter, especially for longer incubation period diseases. This is sort of a medium length incubation period, around 6-7 days. Measles is much longer, sort of 10 to 14 days. For longer incubation period diseases, there's enough time then for activation and differentiation of memory cells to become, in the case of B cells, antibody secreting cells. So it still would work. I think that's where we're going to be here. So I think memory is important. So when people talk to me about how nervous they are that antibodies are fading, I'm not sure you should be nervous about it yet. Let's wait to see what happens as we move forward with these vaccines.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Paul. And I think there's really 2 points you made there that speak to that. The first is, it's not antibodies that probably matter, it's neutralizing antibodies. And frankly, we don't have commercial tests for that. So I don't know how much it matters that your serology test that's measuring IgG and IgM levels over time is changing when that's not actually, or certainly not necessarily, the thing that we care about. We care about neutralizing antibodies, not antibodies.
So to push to get your second dose or third dose and booster shots were all based on that the antibodies in your blood goes down over the period of 3 to 4 months, and a vaccine is no longer effective against the disease. So that was the claim. But as you heard, that the antibodies that we were measuring in a serum, it's not that important. Neutralizing antibodies are more important, and we did not have a commercial test to even measure neutralizing antibodies. And I have a couple of articles regarding other arms of immune system who are also responsible to fight COVID-19. And as you heard about T cells and things like that. And here is from the BMJ, COVID-19. Do many people have pre-existing immunity? And let me just give you some details. With public health response around the world predicated on the assumption that the virus entered the human population with no pre-existing immunity before the pandemic. Zero survey data are leading many to conclude that the virus has, as Mike Ryan, WHO's head of emergencies, put it, a long way to burn. Not so novel coronavirus. At least 6 studies have reported T-cell reactivity against SARS-CoV-2 in 20% to 50% of people with no known exposure to the virus. In a study of donor blood specimens obtained in the US between 2015 and 2018, 50% displayed various forms of T-cell reactivity to SARS-CoV-2. A similar study that used specimens from the Netherlands reported T-cell reactivity in 2 of 10 people who had not been exposed to the virus. In Germany, reactive T cells were detected in a third of SARS-CoV-2 seronegative healthy donors. In Singapore, a team analyzed specimens taken from people with no contact or personal history of SARS or COVID-19. 12 of 26 specimens taken before July 2019 showed reactivity to SARS-CoV-2, as did 7 of 11 from people who were seronegative against the virus. Reactivity was also discovered in the UK and Sweden. So as you can see that T cells were also playing role fighting COVID-19. And there is one more from Reuters. T cells induced by COVID-19 infection responds to new virus variants US study. So that was previous article from BMJ was T cell immunity induced by exposure to other coronaviruses. And here is regarding COVID-19. A critical component of the immune system known as T cells that respond to fight infection from the original version of the novel coronavirus appears to also protect against 3 of the most concerning new virus variants, according to a US laboratory study released on Tuesday. Our data, as well as the results from other groups, shows that the T cell response to COVID-19 in individuals infected with the initial virus variant appears to fully recognize the major new variants identified in the UK, South Africa, and Brazil, said Andrew Reid of the NIAID and Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, who led the study. So if you were infected with COVID-19, that would also give you protection against other variants as well. That's what it is saying in this articles, but which was ignored because people who had COVID-19 were also mandated to get the vaccine. And next few clips are regarding natural immunity, another major thing that was ignored. And this clip is of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and this is from 2004. This is a clip from an interview where he was asked regarding flu vaccine, if someone should get a flu vaccine if they had a flu few weeks ago or month ago.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
so
she should not get it?
If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
So the most potent vaccine is to get infected yourself. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, all the people who were infected and had natural immunity, they were not given exemption for vaccine mandates. And here is, in this next clip, you will hear Senator Burr. He's a Republican senator, and let me just bring out his details. Yeah, he's from North Carolina, and he was a United States senator from 2005 to 2023. And he asked Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who is a physician scientist who served as the director of the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention from 2021 to 2023. When he asked Dr. Rochelle Walensky regarding testing requirements for people who travel back to U.S. citizens who travel back to U.S., they had to take a test. And there were different policies for people who are vaccinated and people who are not vaccinated. And even the CDC's own guidelines gave more weightage to people who had natural immunity compared to people who were vaccinated. And why there was a discrepancy? Because that gives people sense that there is something wrong with the policy. Why people who are vaccinated being asked to get the test?
The CDC website currently says that if you have had COVID in the last 90 days and you leave the country and you come back in, you're not required to be tested before you come to the United States. The website says we recommend that within 3 to 5 days of returning to the United States, you should have a COVID test. I'll leave on Sunday. I have double vaccination. I have a booster. Next Thursday in London, I'll be required to have a COVID test in London before I can fly back into the United States. The CDC's own website puts more value on natural immunity than they do on 2 vaccine shots and a booster shot.
Our guidance is intended, first of all, let me just say, I think our guidance is very simple when it comes to vaccination. It has nothing to do with whether you've been infected or not. We recommend everybody in this country be vaccinated with either 2 doses of a Pfizer or Moderna vaccine or a single dose of a Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It couldn't be more simple. Everyone should get vaccinated who is eligible to be vaccinated. With regard to our travel, our travel guidance and our travel restrictions are to keep Americans safe, to keep people traveling to the United States safe, and to keep our local communities safe.
So they were ignoring natural immunity, and they were encouraging everyone to get vaccinated, but at the same time testing requirements were different. And as you heard that the CDC's own website was putting more value on natural immunity. And one more clip regarding natural immunity. This is from March 2023, CBS News. And they will give you some details on a study that had found that a natural immunity acquired from catching the COVID-19 was long-lasting as well.
And nearly 3 years into the pandemic, the virus is still evolving, and now we're learning just how much immunity people are getting after getting infected with COVID. CBS 2's Tina Kraus explains.
Those two little lines can cause plenty of anxiety, but researchers say COVID infections are giving a good deal of protection, too.
Infection gives you a lot of immunity. I think that's the high-level message, particularly for severe disease and death.
A new U.S. study finds natural immunity is strong and long-lasting for people infected with COVID-19 at least once before, giving them up to 10 months of protection from reinfection or serious illness, and lowering their risk of hospitalization and death by nearly 90%. This is the most comprehensive analysis yet on COVID immunity. Researchers from the University of Washington looked at 65 studies from 19 countries up until September of last year.
So even after that most comprehensive analysis, they were still pushing people to get vaccinated in that report. Now let's hear regarding percentage that was needed to reach herd immunity, and this is Dr. Hotez, and he had with other scientists as well who were keep changing the percentage needed to reach the herd immunity.
Enough Americans get vaccinated, we could actually halt virus transmission potentially. If you do the simple math, I did a back of the envelope calculation. Once you get over 65% of the population with a single dose of the vaccine and 50% with 2 doses, the amount of transmission will really start to decline. 60 to 70%, 60 to 80% threshold. We need to get to about 75% before we interrupt transmission. Around 3/4 of the U.S. population, roughly 80% of the U.S. population.
2 doses turned to 3.
I think ultimately a third immunization with the mRNA vaccines will probably be needed at some point. We thought there was a pretty high likelihood we might have to give a third immunization down the line anyway at some point, because we had no idea about the durability of any protection of any of these vaccines. We ultimately will need to give a third immunization, and I've been pretty much saying that all along. This was always a 3-dose vaccine, and so this was all predicted and predictable. I've always said this is a 3-dose vaccine. 2 mRNA vaccines were always a 3-dose vaccine.
So you heard at the beginning he was saying that 50%, then 60%, 60 to 80%, and he kept increasing the percentage needed. Then 2 doses were enough, then 2 doses were not enough. Now you need 3rd dose, and it was always a 3-dose vaccines, and they keep changing the goalpost to when we can return back to normal. And here are 2 articles, the New York Times, how much herd immunity is enough. Scientists initially estimated that 60 to 70% of the population needed to acquire resistance to the coronavirus to banish it. Now Dr. Anthony Fauci and others are quietly shifting that number upwards. And there are some shocking details. And in the pandemic's early days, Dr. Fauci tends to cite the same 60 to 70% estimate that most experts did. About a month ago, he began saying 75% in television interviews. And last week, in an interview with CNBC News, he said 75, 80, 85%, and 75 to 80+%. In a telephone interview the next day, Dr. Fauci acknowledged that he had slowly but deliberately been moving the goalpost. He is doing so, he said, partly based on new science and partly on his gut feeling that the country is finally ready to hear what he really thinks. When polls said only about half of all Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%, Dr. Fauci said. Then, when newer surveys said 60% or more would take it, I thought I can nudge this up a bit. So I went to 80, 85%. We need to have some humility here, he added. So these people keep changing the goalposts throughout the pandemic on all kind of issues. Natural immunity, herd immunity, percentage of people needed to reach herd immunity, and those kind of things. And let's now see push to get boosters and urging people to continue to get boosters while not keeping the definition of fully vaccinated clear. what it means to be a fully vaccinated against COVID-19 was also changed during the pandemic. It wasn't clear. There was miscommunication from many experts and many government health officials. And let's hear that.
2 shots for a time frame means you are fully vaccinated.
It would be simpler if the language that the administration used is that to be fully vaccinated, you need all 3 shots.
What I would say is that the CDC, they are the ones who make the definition about what's fully vaccinated. And they are actually looking at the data closely to determine if and when that definition should change to include the 3rd shot.
In terms of the definition of fully vaccinated, as you know, the definition right now is 2 doses of an mRNA vaccine or a single dose of the J&J vaccine.
Optimum vaccination is with a booster. I mean, there is no doubt about that.
Fully vaccinated in another sense, in terms of being fully protected against SARS-CoV-2 and especially Omicron, at this point means a booster.
It really is semantics. We're using the terminology now, keeping your vaccinations up to date, rather than what fully vaccinated means.
So individuals are considered fully vaccinated against COVID-19 if they've received their primary series. That definition is not changing. But consistent with how public health has historically viewed or even talked about how we recommend vaccines, we are now recommending that individuals stay up to date with additional doses that they are eligible for.
Yes, so there was a lot of confusion regarding who is considered fully vaccinated, and once they declared that there is certain percentage of population that has antibodies against COVID-19 and who are fully vaccinated, they changed the recommendation for COVID-19 vaccines again, and they kept pushing for more boosters. And let's hear that compilation of Dr. Peter Hotez and many more who had continued to move the goalpost.
By November 2021, the U.S. population had met what Hotez and the government called fully vaccinated.
Today, we hit 2 important milestones. 80% of adults now have at least their first shot, and 70% of adults are now fully vaccinated.
But the goalposts were shifted, and the booster campaign was just getting started.
And we're going to have to change the definition of fully vaccinated. What counts as full immunization will be 3 doses just because we gave those first 2 doses so close together. The idea that 2 immunizations constitutes full immunizations is not even close. You need that booster, and you probably need the second booster. If you've gotten a single boost and you're eligible, get your second boost.
The solution here is just continue mass vaccination as aggressively as possible?
That's right. Now's the time to get a booster if you haven't been boosted in a while. 2 to 4 months out, you're going to need a 3rd booster as well, a 5th immunization. 3rd boosters, meaning 5th immunizations, new bivalent booster. You want to get Paxlovid. That gives you an extra layer of protection as well. You need to get that booster. People need to get their bivalent booster. And the important message that I have this morning is get your new bivalent booster. If you've not gotten it, you have to get it.
They're talking about the 3rd shot. And is that the bivalent, or is it the 4th booster, or does it matter? Like, can you help me understand?
So before Elise was asking me that very question, I said, don't worry so much about the number of boosters. Worry about when you got your last booster.
So all the claims regarding COVID-19 vaccines effectiveness and its durability, they were all wrong. As you heard that vaccines, the antibodies were going down in 2 to 4 months, so you would need another booster, and again same thing, repeat every 2 to 4 months or 6 months you would need a new boosters. So vaccines were not neutralizing, were not giving you immunity against the virus, or were not stopping you from catching the disease or spreading the disease, or the vaccines were not giving long-lasting immunity. All those claims were wrong, but vaccines were still mandated. And this is one article regarding children, and this is from Euronews. COVID vaccines. Which countries are vaccinating children over 5 and how do they compare? And they have details. The EMA authorized the use of Pfizer vaccine for children over 5 years old, and the Omicron variant has put renewed focus on countries' vaccination campaigns. Which European countries are now vaccinating younger people, and they have details regarding all, not all, but some of the European countries, and which countries were vaccinating which children population, 12 to 15 or 5 to 11. And if you read this article, you will come to find that most of the European countries were vaccinating children over 5, no one under 5, most of the countries. And even those age groups 5 to 11 or 12 to 16 age group, not all countries were in Europe were vaccinating those age groups as well. Mostly 12 to 16 age group, and not 5 to 11. So, but in US and Canada, and I think in some other countries like Australia, New Zealand as well, even pregnant women and 6 children starting from 6 months and over were encouraged to get the vaccine. And this last clip is I have taken from a stand-up comedy special by Jimmy Dore. He's a American stand-up comedian, and this summarizes the case against, or all the funny things that were going on regarding COVID-19 vaccines, and how the whole narrative of COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness was wrong. And let's finish the show with that funny clip.
I'm not saying that the COVID vaccine doesn't work. All I'm saying is we all got the COVID vaccine, and then we all got COVID. Imagine if we all took the polio vaccine, then we all got polio. Be like, hey, I don't think that polio vaccine works. Why? Because I got polio. Oh, well, it's just supposed to lessen your symptoms. Oh, then it worked. I'm glad I got it. Oh, look at me all healthy.
So that brings me to the end of this episode, and as I have mentioned throughout the episode, that all the claims regarding COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness were not based on scientific evidence. The percentage were relative risk reduction and did not give you accurate picture of COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness. Their durability, they were saying that it would last for a long time, but that was also wrong. They had ignored herd immunity, not ignored herd immunity, but they had ignored natural immunity, and people who had contracted the virus and developed natural immunity, they were ignored, and they were not given exemption from vaccine mandates. T-cell immunity was ignored, and percentage of population needed to reach herd immunity was changed throughout the pandemic. Who is considered fully vaccinated, that was not clear, and that was also changing throughout the pandemic. So these were the kind of issues there that would cause hesitation for many people, because there was never a need for people who had COVID-19 to get vaccinated. So and next episode I will discuss vaccine hesitancy and campaigns that were pushed and used by governments, state governments, and national governments around the world to encourage more people to get vaccinated, and some more details on vaccine effectiveness as well. So with that, I would like to thank you for watching Broken Narratives. Thank you for your time. Check out the show notes to confirm any of the information. Please share this information with your family, friends, colleagues, and spread the word around, so that in the future we can fight back and not have these kind of mandates that we had during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I hope you subscribe to my channel on Odyssey. That will be the best place to get my content without any interruptions, because as I mentioned at the beginning, that I don't think I would have my YouTube channel for long. I'm not sure if even if this episode I would be able to have it on YouTube channel for a long time. I think I will have another strike most likely on this episode as well. So please subscribe to my channel on Odyssey or Rumble or BitChute, whichever you prefer. And now I have a audio podcast as well on Podbean and some other podcasting apps as well. I will share the link wherever I can. And so if you are not interested in watching the video, just interested to listen to an audio, so that is also now available. Once again, thank you for your time. I'm your host Jay Firangi, coming to you from the Still City, Hamilton, Ontario, and I will see you in the next episode.